Welcome back, everyone, to Astrology Today with Jeff Harman. I'm Ella, Jeff's assistant. So nice to see you all. Thank you so much for joining us again. So tonight, we're going to go into how ancient astrology can help us navigate our way through life. Very, very interesting. Jeff is going to hit on a number of points and really go into examples of how we can do that. But first and foremost, he's going to hit our current events. Right, Jeff?
Yep. Yeah, Leah, I would like to talk a little bit. Thanks for that. There's actually 6 countries right now that just joined Russia in opposing a UN resolution for peace in Ukraine. So this is very interesting because our last podcast we had spoken, or I think it was the last one or the one before, where is this thing going to resolve right away? Is Russia and Ukraine, going to come to a peace accord? And it said no. Said absolutely not, and it certainly doesn't look that way. So we're seeing more tension rise. And the big one that everyone's really, really questioning is, will China jump in and supply Russia arms? China is not going to start, putting troops in there, that's for sure, because that would be really, a signal for war. But it's very dangerous. This is a very precarious area. What I get by the astrology is China's going to back off right now. They're not likely to do it. They might want to, they might support them in other ways, buying oil and all that stuff, but it doesn't look like they're going to directly supply arms, at least not at this time. Now, that could change down the line, but the astrology says no right now. And that's what I would expect. I wouldn't expect them to, do something that provocative to the United States, even though it looks like Belarus, I think it was North Korea, Syria, Iteria, also Nicaragua, which is really funny, opposed that. But again, this is just UN resolutions, so it's not like they're joining the fight. It's just a resolution. But this supports exactly what I've been saying. And I need to remind people, here we are, today is the 23rd of February when we're taping this. And I can tell you that coming right up, we have the final hit on the 7th of March of the Neptune square Mars for the United States. Now, plain English on that, that's the one I've been saying that happened right before the Civil War in 1861. So we've had all 3 sidereal and tropical hits as of March 7th of 2023 coming right up, which is really just less than 2 weeks away. Also, and this is really interesting because we're also almost exactly at that same time going to have Mars in the sidereal zodiac go over the United States, Venus, Jupiter, Sun, and Mars. So, and that's the air trine in the United States. So we're going to see a lot of heat here, a lot of action coming up. And we are, they're putting our focus more on the 2024 campaign, but the world is brewing right now. It's not good. And also, I might remind you, within 3 days of that, on the 10th of March, we have the first sidereal exact conjunction called Sati of Saturn over the United States moon. So we're likely to see a lot more crazy stuff here coming up on the world stage. And, again, Biden was over there reading his teleprompter type speech and basically saying, vowing that we're going to defend every inch of NATO space. So there's a lot more to this than meets the eye, a lot more. And I think if we could go down the rabbit hole, and we weren't on YouTube, we could talk about that a little bit more. But I think there's a lot more going on over there than we'll ever be able to talk about on YouTube. But that's what the chart says. But here's the good news for right now. It doesn't look like Russia's going to jump in here and stir the pot too much at this time. So let's hope that's the case.
I hope that's the case.
You bet. Oh, yeah.
We certainly don't want that happening. Definitely not. Definitely not.
No, we do not want that.
No. Well, anything else you want to touch on current event wise, or? Well,
there's going to be a lot more coming up, and I think
else. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we'll do something more right in the first of the month. But right now, I think that's where I'll leave this. That's the interrogation that I looked at right before the show. So, and that's a big one.
Yeah. Well, then
one last thing, not to cut you off, but we've had some huge solar flares. And again, rather than the whole global warming thing, I would also say that a lot of what we're seeing is the solar flares. I mean, the weather has been very intense all over the country, actually all over the world. So this is one last thing I wanted to point out, and that we're certainly seeing that here in California. We're getting record rains and probably going to have much more so here over the next week, and a lot of erratic weather. Very strange weather patterns. And again, I really believe it's due to the patterns of these magnetic storms that are coming in from the sun.
Yeah. Makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. So, well, let's then please go into how ancient astrology can help us navigate our way through life. And maybe you'll start off talking about interrogation astrology and how that is incredibly helpful. And please give us some examples of that, because I know you get interrogations all day long, every day of the week.
And I've had them for years.
I've certainly asked you a couple.
Oh, yeah, just a couple. Yeah. And I have to tell you, I wish I could get all the interrogations that I have cast all the way back for the last 40 something years. It would be stunning. Because, years ago, I used to be on the DOS programs. And unlike the computer programs today, the only thing you could do was just type in an 8-letter, abbreviation of what the chart was about. And I have a lot of this stuff backed up, and so many questions over the years. Interrogation, for anyone who doesn't know, is literally asking a question. You do not need your birth chart. In fact, this has such a history because, in the days of old, especially prior to the modern industrial revolution, most people did not have an exact birth time. In fact, when you start getting way far back, potentially, with some of the lesser, affluent families, you'd be like if they had a clock. Even in the early 1900s and the 1800s, a lot of times they might not have had clocks. So no one knew when they were born. So interrogation was such a valuable tool. And I always mention William Lilly because he's like probably one of the more prominent of the last of the traditional astrologers. And he used to be summoned all the time by the kings, by various different monarchs in different places, and particularly merchants. Merchants would always ask him, hey, we haven't heard from our ship now for, a month. They're a month late. Did it sink? Is it coming? Did they get delayed? Because you had no way. You didn't have telephones. You didn't have, any way to get in contact. When you set sail, back in the day, I mean, that was it. You didn't see that ship again unless they came back. And sometimes you never saw them. So interrogation astrology is really useful. And I have so many wonderful stories about that. And I can tell you one of the stories, I can talk about is missing money. I've had people call me on. I've had people call me on treasure hunts. And you can actually see an interrogation. Is there gold in the ground? Is there, jewels or something buried in the wall? I actually just had something recently where a gentleman had passed away and he had told his partner that he had hid some gold in the building and no one knew where. And I actually gave them some indications as to where to start to look. And they're looking. I don't know if they found it yet, but they probably have, or I would have heard from them. But anyways.
So the chart then did show that there was something in the building.
They did. It did, yes. And I've seen this. It's such a miraculous ancient science because you can look at horses, animals, dogs. I mean, we used to look at your cats. I've had people who are veterinarians saying, hey, what could we do about this? Now, obviously, veterinarians are using allopathic science. Also, too, I've had people ask questions, and this was one of the premier tools used in health analysis in the days of old. I've got astrologers all the way back to Egypt who would make diagnoses when someone was sick. And they called it bringing the year in back then, which is kind of crazy. But I've seen it today. It's absolutely amazing. I've actually had doctors ask me, Jeff, am I going to make this? And one was sad to report he didn't. And he had a long bout with prostate cancer. And he said, am I going to pull through this? And I said, well, Jim, this is a tough answer to give you. But if you don't do something very drastic, it's looking like it's going to get the better of you. And it did. And I don't like giving those answers. I have people asking me, I cannot get financial advice or medical advice, but I certainly can tell you what the chart says. It's absolutely miraculous. Like today, I had someone inquire as to why the doctors gave the husband and the wife a clean bill of health, and there's no reason that she shouldn't be conceiving. The ovulation cycles were good and all that. And we cast a chart, and why isn't she conceiving? And right away I said, wow, she's under a lot of stress. And then the father said, oh my God, you're right. And then I took the birth chart in the Vedic astrology, and right off the bat, it was totally it manifests in the chart. She had a primary directed moon conjuncting Saturn, stress, plus Pluto by primary direction was conjuncting the natal moon. And I've never quite seen that before. And then it all spills out. Oh yeah, the doctor is saying, she's really under stress, giving her, advice on how to deal with that and using supplements, etc. And I said, well, this is the good news. I said, this chart shows this is going to end probably this spring, and then things should really start to clear up. And I've seen this before. I've actually used electional astrology, and I've worked with doctors. One lady in particular, she was 51 years old, and the doctor actually, I gave the doctor a good time to impregnate her, and of course the client asked me that, and they did so, and she carried, at 51 years old, she carried this child to term naturally after the insemination of her husband's sperm. And she had the child. The child, I think now is like 15 years old, no Down syndrome, which is very unusual at that age, and completely healthy. Very, very strong, healthy individual. So electional astrology and interrogation were like two premier tools that most of your astrologers in the ancient world were very proficient at. And in India, interrogation is called Prasna. And many people listening might also be aware of the term horary. Horary is the Latinized term of interrogation. And I don't like that word because it sounds like, it's got hair on it or something. So I really love the word interrogation because it's exceedingly descriptive, and I have seen just stunning results. I had so many different examples of people who are looking at employees. Like I get all the time questions about houses. Hey, I got 3 houses here. Which one looks to be the best? And I go, well, you've done the research, you've done the walkthrough, you name them off in the order that you're most interested. And then you can look at interrogation astrology as to which house the chart suggests is preferable. Now, I never want to tell anybody what to invest into or what to do, but I'll tell them what the chart says. And it was amazing. I just had one very recently, and this was like the 4th house that the person had mentioned. And I said, that's the best one. Oh my God, how did you know? I said, well, because it's Venus, you see. So you can actually see, and it's amazing when you think about it, how can there be almost 8 billion people on the planet and you cast a chart and it's specific to you? And of course, you got to remember, I'm sitting at a certain location. Interrogation charts are cast where the astrologer does the art of astrology. So it's cast at my location. And this person was sitting on the other side of the world when they asked. So it was really fun. And I could go on and on. I literally probably have, and I'm not exaggerating, if I could count them all up, it's got to be 20,000 plus interrogation charts on record, let alone if I could go back into the archives. It's one of my more favorite tools. In fact, in India, the ancient astrologers would always cast a prashna in concert with a reading. And I do the same thing. Mm-hmm. It kind of gives an indication as to what's really germane and what someone's really interested in.
Well, you can see that how much that can help us navigate our way through life, because constantly we're faced with making decisions and important decisions. And it's hard sometimes. It really, really is. And the astrology, like I said, I've asked a few questions and the astrology has been greatly helpful in helping just give me a sense of direction. And when I ask a question and it doesn't have doesn't give the answer I'm hoping for, I heed to that answer because I know how spot on.
Oh, remember, here's a great example. You had rented an apartment, and I remember distinctly. I said,
"I know what's coming."
Yep. I said, you got Mars in the 7th house, and you said, yeah, but it's reasonable and all that, and it was hell for you, literally.
Oh, unreal.
It was unreal. It was so bad. You actually had to leave because of the noise of the neighbors.
Yeah.
Remember that? It was just
and that's what the Mars would be, right? Right. Smack dab in the 7th house.
Oh, yeah. I get interrogations all the time where someone will say, hey, if I buy this house, what do you think the neighbors will be like? Well, you look at the 3rd from the house that in question, and you can actually see a good deal of what the neighbors are going to be like.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. Absolutely
amazing. Well,
I could tell you story after story. I could be here for 3 days telling stories
I know.
that are incredible about interrogations. One of the best ones, I got to tell this one. I won't mention who this is, but I love this story because had a person store the money in a welder. And I've told this before, but I'll tell it again. And a lot of money too. Didn't want to go to the bank, kept all this money in the welder. And it goes into his machine shop and finds, oh my God, the money's gone, right? Doors open, money's gone. And calls me up, says, oh my God, I just lost all this money. I can't believe it. So I cast a chart, and the thief is always the 7th house, right? So, and I said, by any chance, you got a few kids that are around there? And he says, yeah, they always play on the thing, on the hill out there, on the dirt mound. I said, okay. I said, if I were you, I said, go out there and tell them you're going to call the cops and have them arrested if they don't put the money back. And he says, oh, they're never going to put the money back. I said, yeah, they will. Because see, the Lord of his 2nd, which is your possessions, is the money or whatever your possession or question is. And it was retrograde, which means it's coming back. You have a great story about that, where you had lost some very precious gems. And one of the most miraculous stories, because I'll let you tell it. Well, you tell me.
Well, just quickly. Yes, I had a string of gems, basically. And one day I realized they were missing. And I wear them every day. So it was probably that evening that I went to touch them, and I didn't have them on. So I looked everywhere in my apartment, couldn't find them anywhere. We cast a chart. I asked about it, said that they would come back to me. Now I looked and looked and looked everywhere.
It was over 2 weeks. Remember, it was 2 weeks.
More than 2. It was longer than 2 weeks. Oh gosh, I think it was something like 2 months. It was something like 2 months.
Was it that long?
It was a while. It was a while. But it did show, the chart did show they'd be found by a heater, some type of heater. Remember that?
But something warm. That's right, because it was in a fire sign, the Lord of the 2nd.
That's right. So I looked in my fireplace, couldn't find them. Looked near the kitchen area where the stove would be, all of that. One day, the building manager sends me a text saying, because I told her that I lost the gems. If anyone found them in the building, maybe I dropped them in the building. She sends me a text saying, I think I found your gems. They were in the dryer in the laundry room. And I realized what had happened. I scooped them up with my laundry. I must have had them laid on the bed, and they ended up in the washing machine. Then I transferred them from the washing machine to the dryer. Unbelievable. And she found them, and they came back to me. Never thought I'd see those gems again.
That was in the so
chart.
Stunning.
It was in the chart that I would.
And all the people in that complex, I could have taken them.
Oh, and I know.
Just stunning.
I know.
And yet the chart was right. The chart was right. I got to tell, this is going to be fun because I have another story. So I was taking my son.
You got a lot to cover tonight, though.
Oh, I know. I was taking my son's motorcycle over to his friend. They were going up to Mojave, right? And I made a big mistake. I put an extra set of keys on the bumper of my truck. This is a couple of years ago, right? And so I drop off the bike. I come back home, and all of a sudden, oh my God, where's my keys? And I can't lose these keys. These keys were connected to a lot of things. And I started looking and looking. And then I thought, oh my God, they got to be on the road, right? So I drove up and down for like an hour, couldn't find them. And then finally I was just destitute. I'm like, oh my God, I'll never be able to replace all this stuff, remotes on there and everything. So I go in and I cast a chart and I say, am I going to find these keys? And if so, where? And boom, it comes right back. Yes, you're going to find them because of the aspects. And they were not in the house. They were distant. And that's exactly what I did. I jumped on a motorcycle this time and I was close to the road and the light shines a little more lower. And sure enough, they were about 2.5 miles from here in the middle of the road, picked them up, came home.
I mean, what are the chances?
On and on and on. Right. I've had people with children with fevers. I've had people with all kinds of stuff. You cast a chart, you can see. I've had so many examples. Interrogation astrology, let's just summarize this, is probably one of the most formidable tools in an astrologer's toolbox. And it's stunning. You can ask about anything under the sun, literally. Lawsuits, health, investments, lost items, people, partnerships, businesses, promotions. I can't tell you how many clients say, hey, do you think I'll get fired? No, you're going to get promoted. And sure enough, they'll probably, I can't believe it, I got promoted. Or they got fired if the chart said they got fired. But I mean, I could talk for hours and hours. It's probably one of the most formidable tools available in astrology. And it goes back to antiquity. And what it proves is that the universe is truly an interactive consciousness.
That's right.
Each one of us.
That's right.
And that's what it proves.
Absolutely right. That's absolutely right. Yeah. So let's jump to electional, how that electional astrology can help us navigate our way through life.
Yeah. Electional astrology, again, is picking. It's the reverse of interrogation. It's actually, instead of asking a question, now you're picking a time. And this has been such a wonderful tool for travel, picking good days to take off on a trip. Like, for instance, you could say, if we were going to, take a long trip. I use it all the time. What that allows you to do is you book the flight on a good day, and then you head out the door at a good time. Surgeries. I've actually talked to several surgeons who have said to me, Jeff, we follow procedure to the T. He says, we have to. It's exceedingly detailed. All these procedures that doctors have to go through. And he says, some days, I don't care what we do. He said, it just doesn't go well. Or we have all this traumatic stuff happen. Other days, we can't miss. It's perfect. And I said, look at the astrology. And we took some examples on one person, and it was really fascinating how accurate it was. You can feel it. You can hear the sirens going when Mars squares, the moon or opposes the moon. So, it's really amazing. So what electional astrology is picking an auspicious time to align an important event, like real estate contracts. I cannot tell you how many clients I have had over the years, and I mean years and years and years of them, where I can't sell my house. The realtor shows up with alcohol in their breath or whatever. And I'll say, great, let the contract expire, and I'll look at the time they put it on, usually horrible. And then I'll give them a new time. And they end up I had one lady, she says, we showed this house more in 2 weeks than we've showed it in 2.5, 3 years, and sold it for more than she was asking. So I've done this a lot. I've seen, big real estate deals and little real estate deals really get enhancement. The other way you can use electional astrology is moving into a place. Really important. The day you carry the first box through the door and you bless it. I actually give people a little prayer and a psalm and some incense to actually do that. It's quite miraculous. And you can have the mover show up after you, but you carry that first box that you need to stay there with, and you make it yours. Really, really quite amazing. In fact, again, George Washington laid the cornerstone of the capital of this country at a good astrological time. And let's hope he did a really good job, because this country is under some serious impacts right now. But electional astrology is amazing. And
you can also use it for weddings, right?
Thank you for reminding that. Yeah. Well, I use it for setting gemstones all the time.
Oh, and setting gemstones, right? Gemstones for weddings. Very, very important.
Oh, yeah. And it's very specific. Like when you're pronounced as a couple, that exact time, the eastern and western horizon represents the two people getting married. So it's the bride or the groom or whatever you're doing. So it's amazing because, and if you got the moon doing something ill, you don't want to get married. And the same thing, signing contracts, the same thing. I do a lot of elections for contractual signing. And especially today, we have the convenience of DocuSign and everything's being done by the internet. Years ago, you showed up at your attorney's office and everybody sat at the conference table and signed it. Now that still happens, but not nearly as frequent anymore. Engaging an attorney at a good time is a real good idea. I can tell you, it's wonderful for elective surgeries too. I mean, if you get hurt, you got to have surgery. But elective surgeries like cosmetic things or cataracts and all this stuff, I do a ton of those for people. Dental work, I have so much people. They're like, give me a good time to go to my dentist. In fact, I probably do. I can't tell you how many in a month. So it's really an amazing tool. And again, whenever you're doing an important life event, like, for instance, gemstones, I actually set them so that it not only is a good energy to the planet ruling the gem, but also it has to match the individual's chart. So, right. For instance, I cast the metals on a good day. That's electional astrology. And then I will put the piece in. I have a lot of people say to me, geez, what's taking so long? I'm like, well, I'm waiting for a good time. They go, oh, yeah, great, do that. So the longest I ever had to wait was nearly a year to get a gemstone setting time. Yeah. Well, they were very, very concerned that they wanted a really powerful time. But it's amazing stuff. These are talismans. One of the best stories I can tell is there's an old story from Guido Bonatti in the 12th century. And I don't know if this is true, but knowing Bonatti's background, it might be. And apparently some man said he was very destitute and his family was very broke. So Bonatti had a wax talisman that he had made at a really good time. It was of a little ship, and he gave it to him. And the man started really becoming prosperous. And then he got into the confession booth and the priest said, oh, that's the work of the devil. You've got to get rid of that. So he did. He melted it down. And then he went broke again. So he goes back to Bonatti and he says, can you make me another one? And Bonatti says, you fool. He says, I cannot get that energy for another 100 years. I won't be alive. So,
oh my gosh.
And I do have to admit, I actually talked to Manly P. Hall about this many, many years ago. Electional astrology was something that was very treasured by the ancients, picking a time to commence an important act, whether it was a coronation. So this is why you'll find all presidents are signed in somewhere around noon. The problem is, like we talked about Biden's coronation, not good. And I know he keeps coming back and all that, but I can tell you, I don't know that his presidency is going to finish out from what I can see. Things don't look good. And, we'll see where that goes because he was inaugurated with the sun conjuncting Saturn.
Right.
So, electional astrology is a formidable tool.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, now what about being able to look at someone's birth chart who needs help knowing what type of career to look out for? Let's say, it's an interesting thing because
I do that almost all the time.
We're so creative, and a lot of people just don't know where to go. They feel like they might want to do many things, but they don't know what they should zero in on. So how would you do that? Because that really is giving someone great guidance in their lives.
It is. And I'm very careful with that because I never want to tell anybody what they should do ever. But I love the ancient astrology, particularly one system that I use in the Nadi and the Vedic astrology that's quite profound. And it looks at the angel that is existent right on the eastern horizon when the spirit, psyche, and soul is tied to the body. That often gives such a direction in the purpose behind the individual's path, their soul path. And I love that. Also, the ruler of the 10th house is always career. And in Nadi astrology, you blend that with Saturn. And it's quite profound because people often, like I just had an individual today, he's like, I'm trying to find my path. And, he's 60 something years old. And I said, you got Jupiter about to transit over Venus in your midheaven. This is a time where you could really turn the page. He was an engineer all his life, and then head into something new. See, that's the other cool thing about life and the diversity of America is not a lot of us have more than one career path. And we're likely to change that throughout life. This is where the Vedic doshas and the primary directions and secondary progressions really show these times when new horizons come on the vision. Like, for instance, the secondary progressed moon coupled with the Vedic doshas, stunning. I'm always blown away. I had the secondary progressed moon cross into my 10th house 2 times. And most people can live to have it 3 or 2 times. It depends where the moon was when you were born. And I can tell you, every time it happens, it's like taking a 30,000 watts carbon arc spotlight and shining it right on you. More like a 50,000 carbon arc spotlight. I remember the first time it happened to me, the phone starts ringing off the wall. Next thing I know, I'm doing all kinds of forensics work. I'm meeting with all kinds of celebrities. My business just took off. And that's usually a 5-year peak for everyone. Everyone's going to get that. Now, everyone's going to receive it differently depending on the energies in your chart. But I not only like to look at what the chart indicates might be good. Like, I've had a lot of people who, said, geez, I'm really lost. And you look at this angel on the ascendant, you look at the ruler of the 10th, and then you couple that with not only here's some ideas, but in addition, and this is what I love, you can see when. You see? It's kind of like if you're going to a party all dressed up and nobody's got a party, well, guess what? Got to wait till the party happens, right? So that's kind of like the progressed moon hitting the 10th house. And also good, powerful, what they call the doshas. Dosha is a strange word that means time periods in Vedic astrology. So it really shows, amazing. Look what you've seen in your life. Look what I've seen in mine and so many other individuals. It's absolutely stunning.
Yeah. Well, that's all so much in the transits and progressions, right? And I know you want to touch on that a bit too.
Yep. Well, it all goes together. See, I don't look at any one thing. Right. Yeah, I spend about 30, 40 minutes before I get on a reading with anybody, and I really have a whole sheet that I fill out. It's quite detailed. And in that sheet, it requires me to look at all these checkpoints in Vedic astrology, Nadi astrology, progressions, transits, doshas, and primary directions. And then I have this whole sheet when it's all filled out. Then I'm also looking at, where do you live? See, if you live in a different place than you were born, or even if you do live in the place you were born, you're going to have transits and progressions that are shown in location astrology that supplement all of it. So it all fits together like a set of gears. And if you get it all in there, you're going to get some really useful pictures that can give people a lot of insight. An awful lot of insight. And I also go ahead.
A lot of times when you're looking at that, you pick up a great deal of spiritual stuff pretty much in everyone's chart, right?
It's different for everybody. It's different for, you do. And that's what I loved about really cracking into the whole genre of the Vedic and the Nadi astrology is it really treats us much differently than maybe the Western industrial mindset looks at. It really treats us as our lives are this arc of experience and karma and free will all together. And it really, truly is. And I think the religions didn't want to deal with this stuff. And yet they sacredly have. I can tell you that it's, in terms of the Western religions, the Hebrew religions were a lot more open about it, but they were very close to the vest. And I've actually had a lot of interesting historical documents where you could see the conflict between rabbis and priests and different people all about astrology. And one in particular was Maimonides. I think I had mentioned that earlier. But it really isn't the work of the devil. It's the work of the divine on the soul. And I think the Vedic astrology is unique in that we have a culture that's integrated into the religions. And that's really unique, where the West didn't really do that. The religions railed against astrology. It's the work of the devil, right? And it's anything but, especially when you use it to help people. And that's the key right there, to help people get insight, not to predict the future, not to tell them what to do or whatever, but give them insight and direction from a different energetic perspective. I know I have a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists and therapists that I have as clients, and they're wonderful because they're very knowledgeable about psychology and psychiatry, and they're very intrigued as to why these cycles happen. You can, in fact, here's another thing we didn't mention earlier in the podcast, and that is you can actually see possession with interrogation astrology. And I use electional astrology to clear. See, in other words, is my house got a ghost in it? Or is this person got an entity on them? You can actually use interrogation very effectively for that. And you can also pick an auspicious time to do a clearing where the blessings of the divine are kind of behind you. It's really cool. So I never do a clearing, and whether it's remote or physically, unless the energy is good. There's very specific ancient techniques for that you want the moon separating from malefics and applying to benefics. It's very, very ancient stuff. It's almost like the alchemy of spirituality. It really is.
Right. Well, can you share a little story on one clearing that you did? I know you've done a number of them.
Yeah, well, a bunch of them. Yeah. Well, I can. I'm trying to think of one that comes to mind here.
Well, I know you did one at an apartment building, and I know you also did one at a couple of restaurants.
Yep. A lot of restaurants, yeah. And I've done a lot of people too over the years. And it's very dangerous stuff. And I again, I really caution people playing around with this stuff because, it's all about your technique. And I find astrology really works. Why? Because the astrology doesn't do the clearing. It gives you the window of time and energetics to make it go more powerfully. And that's the difference. It's the same thing why I said gems at good times, or, pick a good time for someone to commence an important act. So it puts the wind behind it, and even events that don't go well go a lot better than they would have had they not used electional astrology. Like I've seen certain times where karma just really comes at people so hard, and that karma has to play itself out. But it was mitigated. It was mitigated by the time that they commenced an act to make it better. So, it's really, I could give some examples here. Like, for instance, I had one particular remote place. They had all kinds of trouble with contractors and people, and there was violence and all kinds of stuff. And they said, geez, is there anything going on here? And I did an interrogation. I said, I think you've got some very hostile old energy on there. And when after looking at that, I said, and it looks pretty intense. And it's interesting because when I got into the clearing, I did it remotely and I went into a meditative state and you astral project there. Well, here's what I found, that there was some very old indigenous people. And it was really a long time ago. Like we're talking possibly the 14 or 1500s when the Spaniards were around over in this country. And there was definitely some Indian energy there. And there was a lot of, you could say violation and anger because they were not treated very fairly. And, that sounds crazy, but I'll tell you what, there is no time. There is so many records of psychiatrists and psychologists and people doing clearing work where various individuals have been trapped in the astral dimension and they don't even know that they've been gone. And it could be sometimes hundreds of years before they even realize that they're in this psychonoetic lock-in, if you will, that they created or that they're living in. And we've heard this too about houses. I've had houses. I had one individual It was up in Sedona, and very interesting situation because very hostile person had died there. And not that the person was hostile, but they got hostile to the new owners. And we had quite a time. And a lot of these people, they won't leave because just like you and I wouldn't want someone walking in our house right now. If you're on the astral plane and you don't think you're dead, well, guess what? And someone violates your space, you're going to become very angry about it. And this is crazy stuff, but it's absolutely true. And here's the proof of it. Even to the non-believers, they say, well, after we did the clearing, the person said it cleared up. And I often have to bring in something to take them away or make them go into the light. And there's a lot of methods to do that. Like various people in different religions will use different techniques. Some people love to use Jesus or Moses or God or whatever you want to do. All that stuff works. But what works most effectively is your belief in the divinity or God and creation and to remove it. And it takes a very pensive, very direct technique to do so. And you bring in angelic forces to literally vacuum the place out or incarcerate them. There's a lot on this stuff. There's many good books that I've had and I've read over the years. I've studied with people about this, but I have to say you get good when you learn it yourself, when you really realize that what you're doing is absolutely true. Look, we did a clearing on one place that you had a long time ago. And there was I got very strongly that there was a person who had OD'd on drugs and they were in this place and they were really hostile. You remember that?
Oh, I sure do remember that.
And you had a psychic that read the same thing.
Came in and it was
read the same thing. Yep.
She got the same thing. And it was interesting because at the time I had a store and she came into the store not to buy anything, just to say, right, there's an entity in the back of your store. Right. And I thought, oh my God.
Yeah, this was an angry guy who OD'd. And I remember clearing him. He was so hostile. I mean, really violent. I mean, like we're talking, this is a nasty dude. He'd stick a knife in your back if he was alive. And what I found, the only way I could deal with him was just to incarcerate him, just build a psychonoetic incarceration. You can do that with sacred geometry and just haul them away. That was it. Just gel them and haul them away. It's kind of like a violent criminal. You just got to put them away. Yeah. And I actually found afterwards you said it cleared up.
Oh, it did. Yep.
Yeah.
It took about a day or two for the energy to really shift, but because you'll get stray etheric elementals still hanging around from that. So interesting. And again, this is all using interrogation and electional astrology coupled with techniques to clear things. So, it's a lot. I really am very careful about doing that kind of work because it's not something you play around with, because I've actually gotten sick from it, where I've gotten fevers or I've just been really depleted because it takes a lot of energy. So it's not something you want to go into with ego. You want to go in with a very humble approach and a very direct approach and a very, very specific, discipline, because if you don't, it's not good. And, this is interesting for people who are Christians. You hear this, in the Christian scriptures where, he cast out legion. Well, I've actually had one, individual, she was a doctor. She just passed away, Dr. Louise Ireland Fry. She actually was an MD who got sick and tired of all the allopathic stuff that didn't answer these questions. And she became a regressionary therapist. And she encouraged anybody to read her book. I mentioned my books on our other podcast, which is about freeing the captives. It's a wonderful book. She's written many books. Oh, Sane and Sacred Death. And what's so interesting is I talk to individuals, even alive, that you can tell their consciousness is rooted very deeply in what they believe and where they're at, which is fine. That's free will. But they say when we exit the body, it doesn't change, and
I just talked to somebody who's going on 83 this year, and very interesting. His consciousness is so rooted where he is. I know, and I try and talk to him. I'm like, really, you're not going to take anything with you. Let all the anger and all the hate go, because you're going to take it with you. You won't take your money, but you're going to take that with you. See, we don't get the possessions; we get the consciousness. That's what goes with us. And the more we realize that, I think we die much healthier, and we don't die anyhow. And this was the messages that I think all the religions have tried to convey, but maybe not have articulated in a way that I think is relatable in a more correct way.
Yeah, making it relatable instead of fear-based.
Fear-based and scolding-based. Yeah. Fear-based. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. Awesome.
Not that I'm here to tell anybody what to do, but I can tell you I'm always encouraging. And I see these wars going on with family. There's so much hatred, the brothers, the sisters, the dad, the mom. And I have that in my family. And, it's just really saddening, because you really want people to bury the hatchet if they can. But this is why the ancient Nadi astrology says we keep reincarnating until these samskaras are dissipated. Mm-hmm. Which are called thought form elementals, which, if you put this into plain English, is your beliefs. Right. Yeah. Pretty simple when you boil it right down.
It is pretty simple when you break it down. Yeah, definitely. Well, I think this was pretty awesome. I love talking about how the ancient astrology can really help us in our lives, because it's so different from the sun sign astrology. And so much of that is out there. Like when someone says, well, I'm a Gemini, what can you tell me? I can't tell you much, because just based on you're a Gemini, because you're a soul having
you and the other you and the other 1 billion Geminis, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So the ancient astrology is
I mean, you can't go by sun signs. What I love about the Vedic astrology and the traditional astrology is, again, how I know I've got the birth time right on, because I always like to center the birth time right to the second that someone drew first breath, and I can always align it by the angel on the eastern horizon. It's so accurate. It's creepy. Every single person, and talk about career direction. A lot of times people say to me, that's I've always felt that way. I'm like, like I had one individual just recently, really a profound, all these degrees, there's like 360 of them. That's a lot of degrees. And that's the circle, right? And these amalgams and arrangements aren't just planets and signs and houses. They're angelic forces, especially when you get into the old stuff. And that really can give tremendous insight into who we are and maybe what we're really here to do, because we ain't taking all this money with us. It'd be nice if we did, but we don't. And there's a real purpose to life, and I think that's to grow and to really realize that we are not our possessions, even though possessions are important. I don't want it to mean that, because we all have to live and eat and be safe and secure and warm and all that stuff. But on the other hand, people will place so much emphasis on that they really lose it. And you brought up, a great point last podcast, and you brought up Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now. That's actually really a great book. Why? Because if people, with addiction or depression, if they just focus on the gratitude of right now, like you said, brushing your teeth, or what can I focus on? It's all about focus. It's all about mind. The whole universes, they say, are built out of the divine mind of God and the angels. Mm-hmm. And it's very, very true. Even your quantum physicists will say everything is energy, and it's all held here in very complex states. But this repetitive creation, destruction, and sustainment is always those forces. And it's really interesting. It's all mind. Everything.
Absolutely. Well, I think we do something funny there, because it really is about beingness, right? Yeah. The power of now, when you recognize your being here and now, it's your beingness. And then the mind automatically jumps in and does something, right? It creates a thought and takes us out of that beingness almost. Yeah.
You take Tony Robbins, you take many, like Zig Ziglar. Who was the other one? I always liked Earl Nightingale. A lot of people haven't heard of him, but Earl Nightingale was a long time ago, really a wonderful, you could say self-help or person that was doing personal coaching. And all these people do one thing. If you really step back and take it up to 100,000 feet, they focus on what you're focusing on. See, we create what we think about. We also create what we believe. You see, and this gets into one of my favorite persons, Abraham Hicks. Abraham Hicks, really love it, where she would go into the power of thought, and almost all of her tapes are all about that. So it's amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. I encourage you to look at that. So, it's all about mental states. No matter where we're at, you always have to redirect the mind. And this seems to be the same case with people who cross over on the other side. That the beliefs that they had, they will carry with them. And hopefully that after enough incarnations, that's how we dissolve. Because I get so many people saying, I don't want to incarnate here. I don't like this place. And I'm like, yeah, it's a tough place. But on the other hand, there is a lot of blessings to creation. I love the human race. It's people that drive me nuts most of the time. but true. I mean, true. It's the ego that drives me nuts.
Yeah,
it's the ego in people.
Yeah. It truly is a blessing to be alive. It truly is in the real sense.
And the demonic forces, this is what's going on through all the wars. I mean, look at how many wars there are in this world. I mean, we just left 20-something years of war in the Middle East from 9/11 forward. And now we're right back in it over here. And they're beating the drum right now. More war, more weapons, more stuff. And you got Putin and Ukraine going at it, and everyone else is positioning and taking sides. So this is definitely a trait that the human race, on this planet at least, at this time, many astrologers have said, we're in the Aquarian age. I don't buy that. I think not because of where the world is, but I really think we're not quite there yet. From all the calculations I've seen, we may be a lot closer to when the Hebrew calendar runs out, somewhere close to that. There's no mile marker out in space that says you've entered Aquarius. I mean, it's at best, we're about 21 to 2200 years per sign. Well, most of the siderealists will tell you it's somewhere between the 3rd and the 5th century, and no one can agree. And I've seen a lot of calculations. And there's Sri Yukteswar. There's all these different ayanamshas. That's a fancy word that just means how do we position the tropical zodiac up against the sidereal, which is where the central sun is and all that. And even to the flat earthers, I say the procession still keeps going on. So this is profound stuff, profound stuff. And it goes on and on. Sorry, my camera keeps going out, but that's all right. But this is profound stuff that I think,
It is. It really is. I love talking about it. I love talking about it all.
Of existence, the mysteries of life.
Mysteries of the soul.
Yeah, mysteries of the soul. It's deep stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about right there, The lower conscious mind is just that. It's not us. We're very disconnected from the upper portions of our minds, most of us, And that's the goal, is when we get out of the white noise of the ego, we start to connect more with these upper intuitive parts of ourselves.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Jeff. This is a lot of fun. I love this.
Thank you, too.
It was great. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in, listening, watching. We hope you have a great week. We hope to put out a video every Friday. So, right, Jeff?
That's what we're working on, yeah.
That's what we're working on, just so everyone can get used to when to look for our videos. But we're hoping to start to get that system down. So again, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
You bet. Thanks for watching.